The tow truck driver stared at what he'd just uncovered and slowly backed away from my driveway. His hands were shaking. What he thought was some piece of junk under a tarp had just turned into his worst nightmare. But that's not even the crazy part of this story. The crazy part is what happened next, and what I discovered about who really owned this entire neighborhood. My name is David, I'm 52, and 3 months ago I thought I was just another divorced guy starting over in suburbia. Boy, was I wrong. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the woman standing in my driveway at 6 a.m., with that smug smile, had no idea who she was messing with. 6 months earlier, my life imploded in spectacular fashion. 22 years of marriage gone, the house I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for, gone to my ex-wife along with half my pension, and my relationship with my kids who suddenly didn't have time for their old man anymore. At 52, starting over isn't exactly what you plan for your golden years. I needed something smaller, somewhere I could rebuild without constant reminders of my failures. That's when I found this corner unit in Willowbrook Estates. 847 homes, prices ranging from $800K to $2.3 million. The kind of place where every lawn looks like it was manicured with nail scissors, and the sound of leaf blowers never stops. You can smell the wealth the moment you drive through those gates. Fresh mulch, expensive landscaping, and the faint aroma of privilege. What sold me wasn't the house itself, though. It was the 3-car garage. See, I'd inherited something from my Uncle Robert that needed proper protection. Uncle Robert was one of those brilliant eccentric types who made a fortune in tech back in the day, but kept his cards close to his chest. When he passed the year before, he left me his pride and joy, a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB that looked like it had seen better days. Real value hides where most people aren't looking, he used to tell me. Surface appearances fool 90% of the population. Uncle Robert had always been full of cryptic wisdom like that. What I didn't know was that this particular piece of wisdom would save my life in ways I never imagined. The Ferrari looked rough, faded paint, worn seats, nothing that would turn heads. I threw a standard grey car cover over it, while I researched restoration shops. Just protecting it from dust and weather seemed reasonable enough. That's when I met Sharon Whitmore. Picture every HOA horror story you've ever heard, then multiply it by 10. Sharon's the kind of woman who treats neighborhood drama like an Olympic sport. 49 years old, drives a white BMW X5, wears workout clothes she's never actually worked out in, and has perfected that smile that could freeze hell over. She's been HOA president for 4 consecutive terms because, as I'd soon learn, nobody else wants to deal with her power trips. 3 days after moving in, there's a knock on my door. Sharon standing there with that fake sweet smile and a clipboard. "Welcome to Willowbrook. Just wondering about that vehicle situation in your driveway." The way she said situation made it sound like I'd parked a meth lab next to my mailbox. I explained it was a classic car temporarily covered while I found a restoration shop. Her smile tightened like a wire under tension. "Well, we do have standards here. Have you had a chance to review our community covenants?" She handed me this unofficial violation notice. Nothing legal about it, but intimidating enough to make most people fold. The cheap paper felt like sandpaper between my fingers. And Sharon's perfume was so overwhelming I could taste it in the back of my throat. She was fishing, testing to see if I'd roll over like her previous victims. That evening, I did something most residents never bother with. I actually read the HOA documents, every single page. And here's what's interesting about most HOA disputes. They happen because people don't know their rights. The covenants clearly stated no specific ban on covered vehicles under 30 days. Sharon was bluffing, but she wasn't done testing boundaries. That same night, she started a neighborhood group text. "New resident thinks rules don't apply to him." Within a week, I was getting the full Suburban freeze-out treatment. Conversations died when I approached. Cold shoulders at the mailbox, the works. The sound of whispered conversations that stopped dead when I walked by became my daily soundtrack. I realized this wasn't about my car. This was about Sharon establishing dominance over the outsider. But here's what I didn't know yet. Uncle Robert hadn't just left me a Ferrari. He'd left me something that would turn Sharon's little power game completely inside out. Something that would prove assumptions can be very, very expensive. And Sharon Whitmore was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 2 weeks after our pleasant doorstep chat, I received a certified letter. Emergency HOA board meeting, 48-hour notice, regarding community aesthetic concerns. The meeting location? Sharon's house, naturally. I've been in enough corporate boardrooms to recognize a power play. Neutral ground exists for a reason, but Sharon wanted home field advantage. She was betting on intimidation through territory. The night of the meeting, I pulled up to her house, one of those cookie-cutter colonials that screams, "peaked in high school." The smell of vanilla candles hits you from the driveway, so overwhelming you'd think she was trying to cover something rotten. Tom, her husband, answered the door with a beer already in hand at 7 p.m. Inside, Sharon had set up this whole kangaroo court operation. 4 board members positioned behind her kitchen island like Supreme Court justices. One lonely chair facing them for me. My footsteps echoed off those granite countertops as I sat down, Tom lurking somewhere behind me, probably practicing his supportive husband routine. "David," Sharon began, sliding a manila folder across the counter, like she was revealing state secrets. "We've received multiple complaints about your situation." She opened it with theatrical flair, Ring doorbell screenshots, printed neighbor emails, and what looked like a property value study she'd clearly Googled minutes before I arrived. "Property values are at risk," she declared. "Children are asking uncomfortable questions. We maintain certain standards in Willowbrook." I listened to this performance, genuinely impressed by the audacity. She'd transformed my Ferrari into a neighborhood menace, threatening the very fabric of suburban society. But here's the thing about bullies. They assume everyone's as unprepared as their usual victims. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my own folder. Inside, every page of the Willowbrook HOA covenants, highlighted, annotated, and cross-referenced with state housing law. The crisp sound of legal documents hitting granite filled that vanilla-poisoned kitchen. "Show me the specific violation, Sharon," she blinked. The other board members started shifting like students who'd forgotten about the test. "It's about community standards." "I understand standards. That's why I read the actual legal documents." I flipped to section 427. Covered vehicles allowed up to 30 days without board approval. Section 6.1.3 requires written notification before violation proceedings. Where's mine? Most HOA disputes happen because residents don't read their covenants. Those documents you signed at closing contain specific procedures that boards must follow. Most don't bother. Janet, one of the board members, cleared her throat. "Maybe we should table this pending legal review." Sharon's face cycled through 5 shades of red. Her intimidation session had just become a civics lesson, and she wasn't the teacher. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Tabled pending further investigation." I packed up, thanked everyone for their time, and left. Victory, right? Not even close. Next morning, 3 strategically placed piles of dog waste decorated my lawn. Anonymous note in my mailbox. "Trashy car for trashy people." In 20 years of dog-friendly neighborhoods, this had never happened. But wait until you hear what she did next, because this is where Sharon's real plan revealed itself. That afternoon, I'm returning from errands when I spot Sharon showing a house 2 streets over. Standard real estate stuff, except I caught part of her sales pitch. Lovely neighborhood, but we do have some unfortunate new additions affecting the overall aesthetic. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about HOA compliance. This was about business. Sharon had been running a sweet little operation, pushing out residents who didn't fit her vision, and collecting commissions on the turnover. My resistance wasn't just challenging her authority, it was threatening her profit model. I did what any reasonable tech executive would do, went home and installed a comprehensive security system. Cameras covering every angle, cloud backup, motion alerts. Something told me Sharon's next move would be worth recording. But while mounting those cameras, my mind kept drifting to Uncle Robert. He'd always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. What if he'd anticipated something like this? What if that Ferrari wasn't the only surprise he'd left me? That evening, I started digging through his old papers. Really digging this time. Buried in a file marked Willowbrook Development 1987, I found something that made me sit down hard. Uncle Robert hadn't just bought a car in 1967. He'd been busy in real estate too, much busier than I'd ever imagined. And what I discovered would change everything. But not in the way you might expect. Sharon wasn't about to let a little legal embarrassment slow her down. Within 48 hours, she'd escalated to psychological warfare. She organized a neighborhood safety meeting. Everyone invited except me. I discovered this the way you discover most suburban conspiracies. Through security cameras, groups of neighbors walking past my house like mourners at a funeral, all carrying identical flyers. The crunch of their footsteps on my driveway gravel sounded different now, judgmental. Next morning, a petition appeared, clarifying community vehicle standards. 23 signatures by noon. Tom suddenly became Mr. Social, casually mentioning to other husbands during dog walks that unclear standards could hurt everyone's property values. Garage doors started slamming whenever I drove by, real mature. But Sharon's masterstroke was bringing in legal muscle. Her brother-in-law Brandon, supposedly an attorney, they cornered me at my mailbox Thursday evening. Brandon wore a discount suit that fit like a burlap sack, carried a briefcase held together with hope and duct tape, and kept practicing his serious lawyer face in my car's reflection. "David," Sharon began, voice dripping false concern, "we need to discuss liability issues your vehicle creates." Brandon cleared his throat like he was delivering the Gettysburg Address. Multiple residents have expressed safety concerns about unknown vehicle contents. Potential homeowners' insurance implications could affect the entire community. The smell of his drugstore cologne mixing with Sharon's desperation was nauseating. Behind us, kids were laughing in backyards, their innocence a sharp contrast to this legal theater. 72 hours to remove that cover, Brandon continued, producing an official-looking document that probably came from a Google template, or face legal action to protect community standards. Anyone can claim HOA representation, but actual authority requires proper board authorization. Always demand to see the specific board resolution empowering someone to act. Most legal threats are expensive letterhead covering hot air. So I did my research. Brandon Kowalski, Esquire, specialized in DUI defense and discount real estate closings. His online reviews were illuminating, 2.5 stars, mostly complaints about missed court dates and unreturned calls. More importantly, I contacted our actual HOA attorney from my purchase documents. Plot twist. Brandon had zero authority to represent anyone. Friday evening, I was back at Sharon's door, this time with real legal counsel on speakerphone. The doorbell felt different under my finger. I wasn't the one being intimidated anymore. "Sharon, we need to discuss Brandon's unauthorized practice problem." She opened the door with that practice smile, but panic flickered behind her eyes like a dying light bulb. "I don't understand what your brother-in-law has been playing lawyer without permission. Here's Maria Santos, our actual HOA counsel." Maria's voice crackled through my speaker. "Ms. Whitmore, legal representation requires explicit board authorization through my firm. Mr. Kowalski has no standing to make demands or threats." Watching Sharon realize she'd been caught was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Tom appeared behind her, nervously jingling his keys, and through their open door, I spotted something fascinating on their kitchen counter: foreclosure notices. Suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't about community standards. Sharon was drowning financially, and her HOA president position was probably the only steady income they had. My resistance threatened her entire survival strategy. "This is harassment," she sputtered, pivoting to victim mode. "You're trying to destroy our community." "I'm protecting it from fake legal threats," I replied. "I need a written apology for the harassment by Sunday, or this goes to the State Bar Ethics Board." The sound of her door slamming echoed through the evening. But it wasn't anger I heard, it was desperation. That weekend brought interesting developments. 3 board members texted requesting private meetings. 2 neighbors stopped by with awkward apologies. Someone created an anonymous Willowbrook Truth social media account, exposing board overreach. Sharon's power structure was developing stress fractures, but I could smell something dangerous in the air, the acrid scent of a cornered animal. When people are drowning, they grab onto anything, including things that drag them deeper. Monday morning proved me right. Emergency board meeting notice, 24-hour agenda about removing disruptive residents. Sharon was going all in with marked cards, not realizing I'd been counting the deck this entire time. But before I tell you how that meeting went, let me share what I found in Uncle Robert's files. Because what I discovered didn't just give me ammunition against Sharon, it completely rewrote the rules of the game. Sharon's emergency board meeting notice hit my mailbox like a declaration of war. 24-hour notice, which violated our HOA bylaws requiring 72 hours minimum. But desperate people don't worry about rules they've been breaking all along. The agenda was beautifully simple: vote to amend community standards regarding vehicle storage, then remove disruptive residents from the community. She was planning to change the rules retroactively to make my Ferrari a violation, then kick me out entirely. The smell of her desperation was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But here's Sharon's real genius. She'd recruited proxy votes from her real estate network, people who didn't live in Willowbrook but held powers of attorney from relatives, plus clients willing to do favors. She was going to pack the room and ram through her amendments with fake votes. I spent Monday evening cross-referencing the attendee list with county voting records, property ownership databases, and HOA membership rolls. The texture of those printed pages felt like evidence building. Meeting night arrived with all the charm of a public execution. Sharon had reserved the community center and filled it with her army of fake residents and real estate cronies. 67% attendance, she claimed smugly, except only 34% were legitimate Willowbrook residents. She stood up front looking like she was accepting an Academy Award, presenting her vehicle amendment with PowerPoint slides. All vehicles must be visible and identifiable at all times, she declared. Daily fines of $50 for non-compliance, effective immediately upon passage. The sound of her laser pointer clicking against the projection screen felt like nails on a chalkboard. Behind me, Tom whispered to people, probably coaching them on voting. This amendment ensures our community maintains standards that protect all property values, Sharon continued, gesturing dramatically at photos she'd taken of my covered Ferrari from various angles. I sat in the back, taking detailed notes, recording everything. Virginia's a one-party consent state, in case you're wondering. Sharon's confidence grew with every nod from her packed audience. She actually thought she'd won. HOA proxy votes must be from verified residents who can't attend in person, not random people doing favors for board members. Illegitimate proxy votes can invalidate entire meetings and any decisions made. When voting time came, Sharon's smile could have lit up Las Vegas. 23 votes in favor, 8 opposed. Amendment passes, effective immediately. She was practically glowing. Daily $50 fines start tomorrow, unless covers are removed. Any other business? I stood up slowly, my chair creaking in the suddenly quiet room. I'd like a copy of the official vote tally and attendee verification list. Her smile flickered. That's not necessary. Actually, it is. I'll need to verify voting eligibility with county records, as required by state HOA oversight regulations. Nervous shuffling filled the room. Several proxy voters suddenly became very interested in their phones, and I could smell fear mixing with that community center's industrial carpet odor. Motion to adjourn, Tom called out quickly. Too late, buddy. That night, I cross-checked every attendee address with voter registration records. 11 people who voted didn't live in Willowbrook Estates. 3 more were Sharon's relatives using their parents' old addresses. The amendment vote wasn't just questionable, it was completely fraudulent. But Sharon wasn't done. Thursday morning brought an official violation notice under my door. Demand for immediate cover removal, plus a $200 administrative fee. Daily $50 fines starting in 48 hours. And here's the kicker, towing authorization if my vehicle remained non-compliant. She just handed me a smoking gun. I spent that day compiling my evidence packet, fraudulent voting documentation, unauthorized proxy verification, bylaw violations, harassment timeline, everything organized, cross-referenced, and ready for submission to the state HOA Oversight Board. I also called Rebecca Martinez, the Channel 7 investigative reporter, who specializes in HOA abuse stories. She was very interested in a story about proxy vote fraud and board member embezzlement, but I held back on sending anything because, while organizing this evidence, I kept thinking about that file folder from Uncle Robert's papers, Willowbrook Development 1987. Time to see what other surprises Uncle Robert had left me. What I was about to discover would prove that Sharon hadn't just been harassing a random neighbor. She'd been picking a fight with someone who had more power in this community than she could ever imagine. That Friday night, I finally opened Uncle Robert's Willowbrook Development 1987 folder with a glass of bourbon and my reading glasses. What I found made me set down that glass very carefully and read everything twice. Uncle Robert hadn't just bought a Ferrari in 1967. He'd been playing a much longer game. The documents were crisp, professional, and absolutely mind-blowing. Sterling Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware 1985. Primary asset, 847 acres of farmland, purchased in Fairfax County for $340,000 in 1987. Development partner, Willowbrook Construction Group. Total project investment, $78 million. Uncle Robert's ownership stake, 67%. I'm reading these papers, and the smell of old tobacco and leather from Uncle Robert's briefcase mixed with my bourbon, and suddenly everything made sense. The Ferrari was never the real inheritance. It was bait to get me digging deeper. Cross-referencing the corporate filings with my property deed revealed something that made my hands shake. Every single homeowner in Willowbrook Estates, including Sharon Whitmore, was technically my tenant. Uncle Robert had structured the development as a ground lease community. The land underneath every house, every street, every common area belonged to Sterling Holdings. Homeowners bought their houses but leased the land through 47-year agreements. Every monthly HOA fee included a ground lease payment that went straight to Sterling Holdings, straight to me. The texture of those legal documents felt different now, heavier somehow. These weren't just papers. They were proof that I owned the ground Sharon walked on. The financial reality made my head spin. I'd been receiving $127,000 per month in ground lease payments for 18 months, automatically deposited into Uncle Robert's old business account that I'd never bothered checking. Total accumulation, $2.3 million, just sitting there earning interest. Sharon's HOA embezzlement, she'd been stealing from my company. The legal implications were even more stunning. The HOA had no authority over landowner rights. Every vote, every fine, every threat Sharon had made was legally meaningless. I could terminate ground leases for harassment, restrict access to common areas, even control utility easements. I called Elena Rodriguez, Uncle Robert's estate attorney who'd been quietly managing Sterling Holdings all these years. Her voice carried a smile when I finally asked the right questions. "Your uncle always said this day would come," she explained. "He knew someone would eventually challenge your right to exist peacefully in your own community. He wanted you to learn patience first, then use power wisely." The emotional weight hit me like a truck. Uncle Robert had orchestrated this entire lesson. He'd known that buying into an upscale community would eventually trigger conflict with small-minded people like Sharon. Elena continued, "Sharon Whitmore has been harassing her own landlord while embezzling from his company. That constitutes grounds for lease termination under Section 12 of the Ground Lease Agreement. I could end this immediately. One phone call and Sharon would face forced sale of her house at a massive loss. But Uncle Robert's note, tucked behind the corporate documents, gave me pause. Some people respect power, others respect justice. Use wisely. The irony was delicious. Sharon had been fighting to control property she didn't own, making threats with authority she didn't possess, while stealing money from the very person she was trying to intimidate. But I had a choice: swift revenge or a teaching moment that could benefit the entire community. Uncle Robert had given me tools for both. The question wasn't whether I had power, it was how to use it. What happened next would shock everyone, including Sharon. But first, let me tell you about the morning she finally went too far. Saturday morning, I assembled my team in my kitchen like a war room briefing. The smell of strong coffee mixed with decades-old legal documents created this weird sense of past and present colliding. First call, Elena Rodriguez, now my secret weapon. She arrived at noon with a briefcase full of corporate documents and a smile that could cut steel. "Your uncle would be proud," she said, spreading out ground lease termination procedures. "Harassment and intimidation are explicit violations. We have cause." Second recruit, Detective Frank Morrison from 3 houses down, retired Fairfax County, now my most valuable neighbor. Frank had been watching Sharon's escalation with professional interest. "I've been documenting her harassment pattern," he told me, pulling out a composition notebook. "Timestamps, witnesses, photographic evidence. This woman's creating a textbook stalking case." The texture of Frank's careful handwriting felt like justice taking shape. Third team member, Lisa Park, forensic accountant, and my former colleague from the tech days. Lisa arrived with her laptop and that predatory smile she gets when she smells financial fraud. "HOA embezzlement is my specialty," she grinned. "Give me 24 hours with those records." Sunday evening, we reconvened around my kitchen table for strategy. Lisa's spreadsheet analysis covered my laptop screen like a roadmap to Sharon's destruction. "Systematic theft," she announced. "Fake consulting payments, kickbacks from contractors, inflated maintenance fees. Total embezzlement, $94,000 over 2 years. Frank slid his evidence folder across the table. Pattern escalation from verbal harassment to property damage to false legal threats. Any prosecutor would call this organized intimidation. Elena tapped her pen against the lease termination documents. "Ground lease violations include harassment of the landowner. 30-day notice required, but given the documented pattern, we can expedite." But here's where Uncle Robert's real genius showed itself. I pulled out Tommy Stevens's authentication report on the Ferrari. Classic car appraiser, ASA certified, 40 years in the business. "Car's worth $2.1 million at auction," Tommy had written. Original invoice from 1967, $11,400. Your uncle bought a masterpiece and let everyone think it was junk. The psychological warfare potential was beautiful. Sharon had been fighting to remove what she thought was trash, never imagining it was worth more than most people's houses. Ground lease agreements give landowners ultimate authority over tenant behavior. Even in HOA communities, most residents never realize they're renting the land under their houses. Elena explained the legal strategy. Phase 1, car revelation during her next harassment incident. Phase 2, present financial evidence to the board. Phase 3, ownership disclosure at a community meeting. Phase 4, media coverage if she doesn't back down. Frank outlined counter-surveillance, additional cameras covering all property angles, body-worn recording devices, encrypted digital backups. We document everything from here forward. The community intelligence network was paying dividends. 3 other residents had contacted me privately about Sharon's harassment campaigns. Frank had identified a pattern. She targeted anyone who didn't fit her vision, then pushed them out through systematic intimidation. Lisa's forensic analysis revealed the leverage I controlled: land ownership, utility easements, common area access, HOA fund sources. You don't just own the land, you control the infrastructure that makes this community function. Most HOA disputes can be resolved by researching underlying property ownership. Many residents don't realize who actually owns their land. Tommy arrived with the final piece: complete Ferrari restoration documentation. Numbers matching engine, original paint codes, service records dating back 50 years. This car's museum quality. Your uncle maintained it perfectly under that cover. The media strategy was crucial. Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 had expressed interest, but timing would be everything. HOA president embezzling while harassing actual property owner, Elena mused. That's primetime material. As Sunday evening wound down, we'd created a comprehensive battle plan. Elena would draft lease violation notices. Frank would coordinate surveillance. Lisa would prepare financial evidence presentations. Tommy would stage the Ferrari authentication reveal. The sound of papers shuffling as we organized. Everything felt like destiny taking shape. Uncle Robert had left me more than inheritance. He'd left me tools to teach an entire community about respect, justice, and consequences of assumptions. Phase 1 would start with Sharon's next move, and, knowing Sharon, that wouldn't take long. Sharon's desperation reached peak stupidity at 5:47 a.m. Tuesday morning. I was awakened by the rumble of a diesel engine and hydraulic whine of a tow truck backing into my driveway. Through my bedroom window, I watched her directing the operation like some suburban Napoleon. Tom, filming everything on his phone for documentation. The tow operator, big guy who'd probably seen every kind of car drama imaginable, approached my covered Ferrari with professional caution. I slipped on my bathrobe, grabbed my coffee mug, and walked outside like I was checking the morning paper. Frank was already on his porch with his camera, retired cop instincts kicking in. "Morning, folks," I called out pleasantly. "Beautiful day for Grand Theft Auto." The tow operator stopped mid-stride. "Sir, I have authorization from the HOA. Mind if I see that paperwork?" He handed me a generic work order signed by Sharon claiming abandoned vehicle creating safety hazard. The cheap paper felt flimsy between my fingers, nothing like the substantial legal documents I'd been handling lately. Sharon emerged from Tom's BMW like a conquering hero, clipboard raised like a weapon. "Finally enforcing community standards, David. Daily fines total $350 now, plus towing fees. Should have listened." The sound of neighbors' garage doors opening echoed through the morning air as word spread. Mrs. Patterson from across the street, the Martinez family, even teenagers who usually sleep until noon, everyone coming out to watch this suburban circus. "Before you tow anything," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee, "maybe you'd like to see what you're removing." I walked to the Ferrari, my hand resting on the cover's corner. "Since you're so concerned about property values," the gathering crowd grew larger, kids pressing against their parents, phones appearing like magic, the whole neighborhood holding its breath. "What's under there, Mr. David?" little Sarah Martinez asked, her voice cutting through morning tension. "Why don't we find out together?" I pulled the cover away in one fluid motion. The gasps that followed sounded like a small crowd witnessing magic. Morning sunlight hit the Ferrari's restored Rosso Corsa paint, chrome wire wheels gleaming, every curve and line screaming Italian perfection. "Holy hell!" the tow operator whistled low. "That's a real Ferrari." Sharon's face cycled through confusion, shock, then mounting rage like watching someone's soul die in real time. Tom stopped filming, his phone dropping to his side. Neighbors who'd been giving me the cold shoulder for weeks suddenly looked like they wanted to crawl under rocks. "It's beautiful, Mr. David," Sarah Martinez breathed, her kindergarten teacher instincts appreciating genuine craftsmanship. "How much is something like that worth?" one of the husbands asked. I produced Tommy's authentication paperwork with theatrical timing. Restoration estimate puts it around $2.1 million. The tow operator was already backing away, hands raised. "I'm not touching a $2 million car, lady. You didn't tell me this was a classic Ferrari." But Sharon, bless her heart, doubled down. "Doesn't matter what it's worth. Rules apply to everyone equally." The crowd's energy shifted like a physical wave. Sharon's face went through 17 shades of pale as the financial evidence destroyed her credibility in real time. That's when Brandon made his fatal mistake. "This is all fabricated. David Reynolds doesn't own anything in this community." Elena stood up, introducing herself with quiet authority. "Elena Rodriguez, estate attorney for Sterling Holdings LLC. Here are certified copies of the corporate ownership documents, ground lease agreements, and state filings." The sound of papers being distributed filled the room. Neighbors checking their own property deeds. Whispered conversations about lease payments they never understood. The awful realization that they'd been watching their own landlord get harassed for months. "Motion for no confidence in the current president," called out Janet from the board. "Seconded," came from 3 different voices. Tom was physically pulling Sharon toward the exit as Channel 7's cameras captured her meltdown. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "I'll sue everyone. The door slammed behind them, but the damage was done. Board vote, 5-1 for Sharon's removal, with Tom abstaining because he was already in the parking lot. The immediate aftermath was swift. Emergency elections scheduled, community vote to reimburse stolen funds, and Sharon's real estate license investigation triggered by media coverage. But I could smell something else in the air. The sweet scent of justice finally being served. 3 weeks later, the community healing meeting arrived with all the fanfare of a small-town election. I pulled up to the community center in the Ferrari, now the neighborhood's celebrity vehicle. The sound of that V12 engine purring drew kids to the windows like moths to flame. Rebecca Martinez and her Channel 7 crew were back for the follow-up story. Cameras rolling as residents filed into the packed community center. The smell of fresh coffee and nervous energy filled the air, mixed with the scent of democracy actually working for once. Sharon was notably absent, her house sporting a bright red "for sale" sign that might as well have read "foreclosure special." Tom had been keeping a low profile, probably practicing his "I was just following orders" defense for the divorce attorney. The meeting opened with Sarah Martinez, our new president, the kindergarten teacher everyone actually trusted, calling for order with a wooden gavel that sounded like justice knocking on the door. "First order of business," she announced, "installing transparent governance to prevent future abuses." Frank Morrison took his oath as security liaison, his retired detective credentials lending instant credibility to our reformed board. The contrast with Sharon's reign of terror couldn't be more obvious. These were people who served the community, not themselves. When Sarah called me to the podium for remarks, the texture of the worn wooden surface under my hands felt different than Sharon's kitchen counter intimidation sessions. This was voluntary, respectful, collaborative. 3 weeks ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the packed room, we learned that assumptions can be very dangerous things. The audience listened with the kind of attention you rarely get in suburban settings. Kids sitting on parents' laps, teenagers actually looking up from their phones, neighbors who'd given me the cold shoulder now hanging on every word. My Uncle Robert left me more than a car and some land. He left me a lesson about patience, about letting people reveal their true character before making judgments. I paused, looking around the room at faces that had gone from suspicious to apologetic to genuinely interested in building something better. Today, I'm announcing the Robert Chen Memorial Fund, named for my uncle's full name, which he kept private during his lifetime. The rustle of program pages turning filled the momentary silence as people checked the meeting agenda, not seeing this listed anywhere. $2.3 million in accumulated ground lease funds will establish an annual scholarship program for local high school graduates pursuing engineering and business degrees. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave rolling through the community center. Rebecca Martinez signaled her cameraman to get reaction shots. This was the kind of positive ending that made good television. $50,000 annually, managed by an elected community committee, with our first recipient being Frank Morrison's granddaughter, who's studying mechanical engineering at Virginia Tech. Frank's eyes welled up as the crowd gave him a standing ovation. The sound of chairs scraping and hands clapping echoed off the community center walls, and I caught the scent of happy tears mixing with coffee and hope. But the real revelation came next. Additionally, we're establishing a community improvement fund, new playground equipment, organic garden space for food bank donations, and an annual classic car show to raise money for local charities. More applause, but I held up my hand for the finale. And because actions should have consequences, we're implementing mandatory financial transparency, monthly reports, open books, and independent auditing to ensure this never happens again. Document everything during HOA disputes. Video, audio, and financial records become powerful tools for legal resolution, but more importantly, they become the foundation for rebuilding trust. Rebecca Martinez approached the podium for the media moment. David, how does it feel to turn conflict into community benefit? My uncle always said, real wealth isn't what you own, it's knowing who you can trust. This community just proved they're worth trusting. The Ferrari sat outside in the parking lot, now a symbol of transformation rather than conflict. Kids lined up to sit in the driver's seat while their parents shared stories of their own HOA nightmares from other neighborhoods. The irony was beautiful. Sharon's harassment had backfired so completely that it triggered positive changes spreading to other developments through media coverage. Her attempt to destroy one person's peace created a model for HOA reform being studied by housing developers across the region. As the meeting wound down, neighbors approached to share their own stories of intimidation they'd been too afraid to report. Pattern harassment targeting anyone who didn't fit Sharon's narrow vision of appropriate residence finally exposed and ended. The sensory victory was overwhelming. Children's laughter during Ferrari engine demonstrations, the smell of barbecue smoke from our impromptu celebration, warm handshakes and genuine hugs from people who'd shunned me weeks earlier. Justice served with a side of community healing. Exactly what Uncle Robert would have wanted. The sound of sunset reflecting off perfectly restored chrome told me this story was ending exactly right. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates graced the cover of Virginia Living magazine as a model HOA community. Property values up 12%, community satisfaction through the roof, and my Ferrari now a regular fixture at regional car shows, raising funds for local charities. The Robert Chen Memorial Fund awarded its first scholarships in May. 5 local students pursuing engineering and business degrees, with Frank Morrison's granddaughter leading the pack at Virginia Tech. Standing on that graduation stage, watching her accept the check, I could almost feel Uncle Robert's approval mixing with the smell of fresh flowers and new beginnings. The community garden project became something beautiful. Residents growing vegetables for the food bank, kids learning where food actually comes from, neighbors collaborating instead of competing. The sound of children laughing while picking tomatoes replaced the whispered conversations and slamming garage doors of Sharon's reign. Speaking of Sharon, she relocated to North Carolina, where real estate licensing requirements are apparently more forgiving. The marriage survived barely, and Tom found steady work in medical device sales. Occasionally, anonymous donations appear in the scholarship fund, and I have my suspicions about their source. Redemption takes many forms. My personal life found its rhythm too. Sarah Martinez and I started dating after the dust settled. Nothing rushed, just 2 adults who discovered they enjoy each other's company during community planning meetings. The kids approve, which matters more than I expected. The Ferrari restoration reached museum quality, now valued at $2.4 million, according to Tommy's latest appraisal. But its real value is symbolic, transformation from hidden treasure to community centerpiece. Just like Uncle Robert planned all along, always research property ownership history before buying into HOA communities. You might discover unexpected rights, responsibilities, or opportunities to create positive change. The ripple effects keep expanding. Rebecca Martinez won a regional Emmy for her investigative series on HOA abuse, and our story became a case study in journalism schools about finding human interest angles in local politics. 3 other communities have contacted me for consultation on similar issues. HOA tyranny is more common than anyone wants to admit. Elena's law firm now specializes in ground lease and property rights disputes, helping other landowners discover forgotten assets and authority. Frank started a security consulting business for residential associations. Lisa's accounting practice expanded into HOA financial auditing. Everyone found purpose in the aftermath. The broader social impact exceeded my wildest expectations. Our annual classic car show draws hundreds of visitors, raising over $75,000 last year for homeless services and food banks. The community festival brings together 5 neighboring developments, building bridges across traditional suburban boundaries. But the most satisfying change, monthly HOA meetings where residents actually participate, transparent financial reporting, collaborative decision-making, genuine community spirit. We transform from Sharon's dictatorship into functional democracy, proving that small-scale governance can work when people care about fairness over power. The personal healing surprised me most. My relationship with my teenagers improved dramatically once they saw me standing up for principles instead of just complaining about problems. They spend equal time at both houses now, and my ex-wife grudgingly admits I've grown during this experience. Uncle Robert's wisdom fully integrated into my daily life. Patience over reaction, preparation over emotion, justice over revenge. His letter, found in the Ferrari's glove compartment, said it perfectly. Real victory improves everyone's situation. The sensory conclusion feels right. Ferrari purring as I drive to speaking engagements, fresh flowers blooming in our community garden, smooth steering wheel under my hands as I navigate toward new adventures. The rearview mirror shows grateful neighbors waving goodbye, but forward momentum carries more promise than backward glances. So here's my challenge to you. What's your HOA horror story? Share it in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else recognize the warning signs before things escalate. If this story helped you understand your property rights, or gave you hope that justice can prevail against petty tyrants, hit that subscribe button. We've got more David versus Goliath stories coming your way next week. The woman who discovered her subdivision pool actually belonged to her grandmother's estate. Trust me, you'll want to see how that turns out. Remember, knowledge is power, but patience is strategy. Sometimes the best revenge is living well and helping your community do the same. The sound of that Ferrari's engine echoing through improved neighborhoods tells me Uncle Robert would be proud of what his lesson accomplished. Another day, another HOA drama wrapped up. If this story made you shake your head or fist pump in victory, smash that like button, share your own HOA experience below, and subscribe so you'll never miss another battle in the suburbs. Dee's energy shifted. You could feel their sympathy evaporating like morning dew. Tom was pulling at her arm, whispering urgently, but Sharon was too far gone to recognize the cliff she was standing on. Anyone else think this looks like junk? I asked the gathering crowd. Nervous laughter rippled through the neighbors. Kids were asking their parents if they could touch the car. The social tide had turned completely, and Sharon was standing alone on the beach watching her authority wash away. That's when I dropped the first bomb. Sharon, there's something else you should know. I pulled out my phone, Elena already on speed dial. You've been trying to tow your landlord's car. The confusion on her face was almost worth 18 months of harassment. Almost. I own the land your house sits on through ground lease agreement. Every monthly HOA payment you make includes rent to my company, Sterling Holdings. You've been harassing your own landlord while stealing from my business. The sound of Sharon's world crumbling was audible, a sharp intake of breath like someone had punched her in the solar plexus. Tom went pale, finally understanding the financial implications. The crowd murmured among themselves. Cell phones out, Google searches happening in real time. That's impossible, she whispered. I showed her Uncle Robert's corporate documents, officially notarized, completely legitimate. 67% ownership of the land under this entire community. Your embezzlement scheme? You've been stealing from me. The tow truck was already pulling away without the Ferrari. Neighbors were approaching to apologize, to examine the car, to distance themselves from Sharon's sinking ship. Social media was exploding. Frank's video already posted to the Willowbrook Truth account, sharing real-time updates. But I could smell something dangerous in the air. The acrid scent of a cornered animal about to do something spectacularly stupid. You want to know what happened next? Sharon's nuclear meltdown that same evening makes everything you've seen so far look like a warm-up act. Sharon's nuclear meltdown arrived that evening with all the subtlety of a car bomb. Emergency board meeting notice posted on every door by 6 p.m. Agenda items that would make Stalin blush, removing fraudulent residents from community, and legal action against disruptive elements threatening property values. She'd gone full scorched earth, claiming I'd deceived the community about my financial status and manipulated property records through criminal fraud. The smell of her desperation was so thick you could bottle it and sell it as anxiety cologne. But Sharon's real evil genius showed itself in her next move. She wasn't just planning to kick me out, she was going to destroy my reputation first. Her real estate network became a gossip machine, spreading stories about con artists with stolen cars and probable criminal money. The Whisper campaign painted me as everything from a drug dealer to a tax evader. Meanwhile, Lisa's forensic accounting had uncovered the brutal truth about Sharon's finances. 3 months behind on mortgage payments, foreclosure proceedings already filed, real estate business circling the drain thanks to market downturn. This wasn't about HOA compliance anymore. This was about survival. Wednesday evening's emergency meeting felt like walking into an ambush. Sharon had reserved the community center and packed it with her usual suspects. Tom looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Brandon, the fake lawyer, sweating through his polyester suit. 2 remaining board loyalists who still believed her propaganda. The smell of industrial carpet mixed with fear and cheap coffee created this nauseating atmosphere of suburban warfare. Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 was coincidentally in the parking lot with her news crew, tipped off by someone who definitely wasn't me. Sharon opened with a prepared speech that would make McCarthy proud. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been infiltrated by someone who deliberately misled us about his identity and intentions. She had PowerPoint slides now, photos of my Ferrari, screenshots of property records, even a timeline of my deceptive behavior. The sound of her laser pointer clicking against the projection screen felt like a countdown to her own destruction. David Reynolds has been masquerading as a legitimate resident while running some kind of elaborate real estate scam, she declared, gesturing at carefully cropped documents that told half the story. Brandon stood up, legal pad in hand like he was cross-examining a murder suspect. We have evidence of fraudulent property claims and possible identity theft. The board moves to revoke his residency eligibility pending investigation. I sat in the back with Elena, both of us taking detailed notes, while Sharon hung herself with her own rope. The crowd was buying it, worried murmurs, suspicious glances in my direction, mob mentality kicking into gear. Any resident engaging in criminal fraud, Sharon continued, forfeits their right to live in our community. We're voting tonight to begin removal proceedings. That's when I decided she'd had enough rope. I stood up slowly, the metal chair scraping against the floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. Sharon, before you call the police on your landlord, maybe you should see the complete financial records. Elena opened her briefcase with theatrical precision, pulling out Lisa's forensic analysis. The rustle of official documents cut through the room's tension like a knife through butter. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the crowd, I'd like to present evidence of systematic embezzlement by your HOA president. The PowerPoint slides changed, Lisa's spreadsheets replacing Sharon's propaganda, fake consulting payments, inflated maintenance contracts, kickback arrangements, all documented with bank records and corporate filings. $94,000 stolen over 2 years, I continued, from Sterling Holdings, the company that owns 67% of the land your houses sit on. The crowd's energy shifted like a physical wave. Sharon's face went through 17 shades of pale as the financial evidence destroyed her credibility in real time. That's when Brandon made his fatal mistake. This is all fabricated. David Reynolds doesn't own anything in this community. Elena stood up, introducing herself with quiet authority. Elena Rodriguez, estate attorney for Sterling Holdings LLC. Here are certified copies of the corporate ownership documents, ground lease agreements, and state filings.